6 March 2014 in the Crimea held a so-called referendum, and 2 days later in Moscow signed the agreement on the adoption of Crimea in structure of Russia. The Russian annexation ended in a few weeks. For the world, events on the peninsula were really a surprise. For the first time since the Second World War, one state increased its territory in the result of what took her in the other. In Ukraine, remember well the video as the column of an armed Ukrainian military under the national flag walks towards the people, guided machines. These events occurred at a military airfield Balbek near Sevastopol. What happened before that? Here for the first time there were these people in helmets and camouflage. BBC correspondent Christian Fraser told from the scene. Next to him is a group of pro-Russian representatives of the Self, and on the way to the air unit was blocked by a car with armed, little green men, with no signs of recognition. Putin assured the world that the Russian soldiers in the Crimean events did not participate. Ukrainian ships from the shore was blocked by the same masked men in camouflage with no signs of recognition. Sandwiched in the Sevastopol Bay, the ship was in a quandary. The Russians staged a siege of that without outside help could not be completed in favor of the Ukrainian sailors. The headquarters of the Ukrainian naval forces in Sevastopol were surrounded by armed men without insignia on camouflage uniforms. There were new groups of civilians who chanted pro-Russian slogans and tried to persuade the Ukrainian military to open access to the territory. BBC correspondent Ben Brown spoke with the scene about the situation near the headquarters. At some point in the camera, one of the Cossacks with Russian symbols poked his whip. These days, appointed by the order from Kiev, Commander Denis Berezovsky pledged allegiance to Crimean people. Subsequently, after the headquarters seized by armed groups and posted on the territory of the Russian flag, most of the officers and contract servicemen as a traitor Berezovsky has agreed to serve in the Russian army. While the Little Green Men was held under siege by the Ukrainian military, representatives of the so-called Self and group the civilians with Russian symbols blocked the work of Ukrainian journalists and representatives of international organizations. Not all remember that these people are forced to leave. Simferopol advisor to the Union Robert Seri, because of the incident in the Crimea, is very alarmed colleagues of the diplomat at the headquarters of Union in New York. All I remember that the first representatives of pro-Russian forces announced a referendum on the status of the peninsula on May 25. Since the emergence of armed, green men, to the referendum should take 2 months. But pro-Russian forces crossed events. For example, the chairman of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people, Rafat Chubarov. He stated this at a press conference right under the walls of Parliament of an autonomy. But the Ukrainian flag in Simferopol, in those days waving only above the railway station, which continued to run trains to Kiev. This was in the report of BBC correspondent Oleg Boldyrev. Pro-Ukrainian activists tried to show that not all the autonomy they want separation from Ukraine. However, their peaceful demonstration came upon the aggression of the troops of the Self and fans of Russian world. BBC correspondent Ben Brown visited the meeting on the occasion of the birthday of Taras Shevchenko in Sevastopol. Then, people with Ukrainian flags were attacked. Reporter said that journalists had to leave the location in front of the monument to Shevchenko because of threats from pro-Russian groups. In the 90s, eyes of the Crimea noticeably drifted in the direction of Russia. And then in the autonomy, there was even a President Yuri Meshchev, who did not recognize the official Kiev and the international community. With the beginning of the events of the so-called Russian Spring, Bags returned to Crimea from Russia. In a BBC interview, he justified the actions of the Russian side, appealing to the fact that the Crimean Tatars took the side of Bandera. Also called the situation in Crimea an excellent result. Unrecognized by the world, the Republic of Crimea, after pro-Russian forces organized a referendum on March 18, 2 days after the vote, was declared part of the Russian Federation. Putin said that Crimea will never Bandera.